Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Morning Coffee Podcast. I am your host, Brooke Carlock. Thank you for joining us. As always, if you're joining us live, feel free to leave questions and comments in the chat, and we can put them up on the screen, and my guests and I can discuss them. Today, I am really honored to welcome Donna Kendrick to the podcast. So, Donna is a certified financial planner, and this is, I think, different than any other guest that I've had before. So, I'm super excited for this discussion because finances are something that I feel like not a lot of people discuss in the grief world. So, Donna is the founder of Stefton Financial and also the author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, A Guide to Widowhood, Navigating the First 3 Years. And she also has another book that came out in 2024 that is a guide specifically for blended families, called A Guide for Blended Families, Merging Assets and Navigating Financial Challenges. So I am so excited to have her here today. We will bring her on the stage. Welcome, Donna. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me and making the time to share a little wisdom here.
Yeah, of course. Like I said, I was part of a blended family for a little while, and also, having gone through the grief, I'm anxious to hear about your story and kind of how that led to you helping other people with their finances. So first, though, before we start, can we start off with what are you drinking this morning? I always have my protein coffee with me, but I like to find out what everyone else is drinking.
All right, so here we go. So I have two. So this is
Oh,
my
okay.
black coffee. I do intermittent
Okay.
fasting. 50 came fast and furious, and so did menopause and all of that. So
Yeah.
I drink black coffee until 12, then I can eat, and then I stop eating at 8. And
All
then
right.
hydration. I am a seltzer
Nice.
fiend. I love it. Love it. Love it.
I love that you got the variety there, the two different choices. Very
Hydration
nice.
and
Very nice.
energy.
Yes, that's awesome. And I'm impressed that you can drink black coffee because mine, I always say, is more like it, it's more like protein shake than coffee. It's like a little bit of coffee flavor, but not much else. I could never drink black coffee, but I love my protein coffee. Okay, but enough about that. Could you just start out telling us a little bit about your background and your story and kind of what led you to getting involved in the grief world and the financial world?
Yeah, definitely. So, born and raised in Philadelphia, PA, and wound up
Woohoo, go
marrying my
Eagles. Are you an Eagles
I
fan?
know.
You're
Huge
not?
Eagles fan,
Okay.
huge, and even better, there's a big parade on Friday, for them winning the Super Bowl, and it brought my big kids that are away at college home for a visit. So I know they
Oh,
were there
that's
for the
awesome.
parade, but I got a good, like, 30-minute hug out of it, so it was fine.
That's very cool. I'm a teacher and we discussed earlier, I live, not actually far from you, and a bunch of my students were out on Friday because they
Yeah.
went to that parade. So
Yeah, we called the
anyway,
kids out
sorry.
with bird flu. No, it's fine, anything we can celebrate, but yeah, bird flu was on our, excuse for getting the kids out of
Oh, there
school.
you go.
But no, so, met my husband, Greg. He was also from Philadelphia, got married, and we were both educated, and we called them like call ourselves yuppies, right? Like we
Mhm.
had our first house as a single house. We were ambitious. Gave up my career to follow him abroad. He worked for Homeland Security and had a position over in Rome, Italy. During that time period, we had our 3 kids. So wound up coming back stateside 2011 and back to the Philadelphia area 2013. So really pretty much like a type of like almost a military family. Moved about
Yeah.
every 2 years. The kids moved schools. And about 3 months after we moved to this area in the suburbs outside of Philadelphia, Greg passed away.
Mm.
He had taken his life, and I was working part-time, making $17,000 a year, and
Oh
my
my
kids were
goodness.
8, 11, and 12, and I was like, "Oh boy, like, what am I gonna do?" Like, the
Oh,
day he died, so did his income, and
yeah.
so did my ability to save for retirement, so did my everything. We had no cash reserve at the time because we had sold a house in Nazareth, PA, to buy the house close to Philadelphia, and so all of our cash was tied up in those 2 house sales. So I couldn't even afford his funeral. I literally had to put
Mm.
life insurance, which I was so lucky enough to have, against, his funeral. So life insurance paid the funeral home first, then I went to the funeral home to pick up my check to see how it could survive for the next, 50 years. How
Oh
did
my
that work?
gosh.
Yeah, and took about 2 years to just kinda get myself together, still working part-time, making sure the kids were okay, because they were in a brand new school. One of them was learning to speak English in school because we had lived in Italy for so long, and, and didn't know how I was gonna make an income, right? And so after
Yeah.
the 2-year period, I kinda reflected back on what was most impactful, right? 1, the community I moved into, they were just phenomenal. And then 2, was it my estate attorney, my accountant, my financial planner? What was it for me? And really, it was my financial planner, the one I had prior to Greg's loss that
Mhm.
encouraged me to get the life insurance money that allowed me to keep my house and keep my kids in school. Like, that was a great part and allowed me that 2-year wiggle room between Social Security, survivor benefit for the kids, and what I had saved from that life insurance. I was able to kinda pause and think, "What's my next best move?" And that was really
Yeah.
key for me, and so was the new financial advisor. About 70% of widows and widowers or even divorcees will switch financial advisors, either because it doesn't fit their need right then, or maybe they
Mhm.
didn't have a strong relationship with them. For me, it was just I needed a new need. I needed someone who
Yeah.
could work with a widow, my emotions at the time. Kinda went to that financial advisor 2 years after Greg passed and said, "Hey, thanks for all that you did. You've inspired me. I wanna do what you do for widows, for people in
Yeah.
transition, for families. How do I do it?" And he gave me, I call it the guide path of really what education I needed to have, how much mentorship, what designations would be powerful. Because you have to think I was in my mid-40s when I was switching this
Yeah.
career. And he actually took me under his wing. I mentored under him, and then in 2020 was able to launch my own financial practice with that niche market. So Sefton is my
Mhm.
maiden name. This is named after my father, who was blue collar. He was a janitor at our school in exchange for our tuition. And, he always used to say he would never have his name on a wall. That's why he was, like, on the door, because he was educating me
Aw.
and my sister, 'cause he was just blue collar. So it's on
Yeah.
his name's on the door. People are like, "Why'd you name it Sefton?" I'm like, "It's my dad, like, it's his, it's my maiden
Oh,
name."
that's beautiful.
Um,
I love that, though.
yeah.
It just is very inspiring what you've chosen to do, with after your loss. I am, as you know, I was a mom of 3 kids before Libby passed away, and just thinking about kind of being left alone with 3 kids. It's funny because you
Yeah.
started talking right away about, what am I gonna do to survive, and thinking about the monetary aspects. How did you manage that along with what I'm assuming was the deep grief of losing your husband?
Yeah, I mean, and that was probably the hard part that I probably skim over because it's really hard to share. Like, I
Yeah, yeah,
was God, it was like a snow globe being shaken really, really fast, and I didn't think I could keep up. And I will tell you, I am a goal-oriented person, so the
mhm,
very first year after Greg passed, all I wanted was everyone to be like, if a neighbor asked or a friend asked, like, "How's Donna and the kids?" I wanted the answer to be like, "They're doing amazing. They're doing good,"
yeah,
right? And that was just kind of, stuffing that grief deep down and getting to life. I
yep,
The lucky thing for me was that my husband traveled so much with work, and sometimes he'd be gone for 3 months at a time. So it was not uncommon for the kids and I to be alone in the
mhm,
house. So it didn't feel shocking to me or the kids. And so I kinda just flipped the switch in my head, a make pretend
yeah,
switch, that he was gone for 3 months, and I was just gonna carry on. And I would just repeat that over the first year of loss. And then comes the 2nd year, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, we
yeah,
had gone through the year of first, and I wasn't ready for this to be the new reality. Now, we had some really good support systems in place. That
mhm,
first year, my kids' school was phenomenal. We had our kids into, a free, like, peer support group. I think it's based on the Dougie Center out in
yep,
California. So it's for loss of a parent or a caregiver or a loved one. That was so impactful because my kids would go for loss specific, because dealing with someone who died by suicide is very different to someone who might have
yeah,
struggled for cancer for years. And
right,
for my kids to be able to have the right verbiage within their social set, right? To was what was taught in that. It
yeah,
was called Safe Harbor in that event. But then we as parents had to go into a group meeting to learn about what the kids were learning. So over
mm,
the 2-week period, we could implement it. So that was really helpful. And I did bump on the grief recovery process.
Mhm.
And I love that, right? Just because I'm a mathematical brain, like this was a good 8-week step of me of like how to identify it, how to write a timeline, how
Yeah.
to kind of dissect it. And that really helped me. Um, I know a lot of fellow like, when you're a widow and widower, you hang with others, right?
Mhm.
Some people who I say, like, just couldn't get their groove back, right? They just really
Yeah.
sat in that grief, and they couldn't pull themselves out of it, and maybe it's my coffee level, maybe it's because 'cause I'm hyper, maybe it's from I was raised in Philadelphia where you just didn't take the no, right? You just kept pushing. It's kind of how I was raised,
Yeah.
thankful, right? That I wasn't even mm, it didn't even occur to me to take a break and just grieve a little. I just kept
Yeah.
moving. Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't
Yeah.
recommend that to all, catches up. So
No, but it is a common reaction for a lot of people because I did something very similar when my daughter died. I was just go, 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 and I didn't wanna stop going because I I knew that if I stopped staying busy all the time, that it would hit me, which it did. Um, but yeah, I can relate to that very much. So I'm assuming you are extremely relieved that you had that life insurance. I mean, I'm sure that there are so many widows and widowers out there who do not have that and then are just completely stuck. I mean, do you
yeah.
ever imagine what it would have been like if you hadn't had that at all?
Yeah, I can't, right? Like, for me, that was the true blessing, and that is where the calling came because I
Yeah.
work you think I work specifically with widows and widowers. Well, I do, that's my specialty, but then as time goes on, you start to get referred out, right? And then I found this passion of wanting to protect couples so that
Mhm.
if something like this would happen, that she would be okay, that he would be
Yeah.
okay, that she would be okay. Just that the people you love are taken care of. And so I do a lot of educational events, a lot of talking. One of the reasons why I wrote that my 2 books, as
Mhm.
well as we have a podcast out there to really help people who might not be needing full financial planning, but just that awareness, right?
Right.
Beneficiary reviews, like the 401k. Is it your husband's old girlfriend Fifi who's
Yeah.
listed on the beneficiary form for that life
Yeah.
insurance or that 401k, or is it you? And sometimes until we pull it out and dust it off, like, we don't see it, right? And do you
Yeah.
have your estate documents done, your will, your healthcare directive, your power of attorney? Like, those were some hard decisions too in widowhood
Mhm.
to wrap my head around, right? I didn't have
Yeah.
a spouse to leave the kids to. Who was going to raise them? Who was going to keep them in the house? Who was going to keep them in their school district? Those were those activities that I did early on that helped me feel like I had my grounding.
Mhm.
So when, quote unquote, "the bottom fell out," when I really had
Yeah.
to deal with the grief, I knew it was all done. So that was
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love this discussion because like I said, I feel like it's one of the things that people do not talk about, and it's something that I actually get on a soapbox about having lost. I don't know my story really quickly. In a year and a half, I lost my dad, my
Mm,
stepmom, my mom, and my daughter, and it was just like this whirlwind. But I had to go through the estate process with both my
mm,
dad, stepmom, and their estate, and then my mom, and then losing my daughter, it was like you realize you have no idea how long you have. And it
yeah,
is such a gift to make sure that you're prepared for that. That I am constantly telling people now, like, get your shit together just for the
right.
people that you love who are left. Because it is so much harder when things are not prepared and not planned. So yeah, I'm like you. I'm kind of like type A. I had all that. I never used to feel like it was so important, but grief definitely opened my eyes to how important that stuff is, even though it's not like the sexiest topic in the world. It is so necessary and so helpful. The other thing that a lot of the things that you say speak to me because I was also, we had discussed earlier, part of a blended family and with my second husband. And I wish I would have known a lot of the things that you talk about in your books before going into that. So I love that you're kind of helping these two different groups to talk about these things that are uncomfortable, frankly, for a lot of people to talk about. Um,
Yeah.
I guess what I kind of let's just kind of start with some basic advice maybe that you would give to people, because I'm just thinking when I was younger, my parents were divorced. They went through a terrible divorce, and my mom was kind of in your position. It was a divorce and not a death, but she was left with no job. She had never worked, and we really struggled to make ends meet, with my mom, whereas my dad had a bunch of money and was out and was like party dad, fun dad. But then my mom really struggled because she hadn't done anything really on her own. And I saw that growing up and internalized that as like I needed to be my own person financially. So, I did the whole college, get the job, have the stable, income because of that, because I saw her and it was terrifying
Yeah.
relying on somebody else. So, I guess when people come to you after these terrible situations, what kind of steps do you take them through or tell them are important?
Yeah, one of the very first things is, and thank you for sharing that story because this just
Mm,
sounds like your head was spinning with the
yeah.
loss in so many different ways too, right?
Yes.
So the grief
Definitely.
feels different with each loss. The activities you have to do physically to settle estates is very different than caring for a family and extended. It's hard. It's hard.
Yes, it is
So
very
the
hard.
very first thing I always say to anybody who I want to talk to, if I'm at a cocktail party, if it's on one of my podcasts, if it's a client that's just like, "Oh, I heard about your practice." One, we're
Mm,
going to talk about life insurance, whether you have it,
mhm.
whether you don't, whether you can qualify it, whether you can get it from your employer. And that isn't something fully in financial planning, but it's a topic called protection planning. And I
Right.
want to know that for you and for the next person, right? I was really, really so I remarried 2 years ago, also a blended family. That's where the second book came from. A lot of that advice came from the fact that I was keeping my story of my struggles to share finances and to let
Yeah.
go of the reins a little bit. I
Yeah.
felt very disingenuous with what advice I was giving my own clients. And here I was being stubborn, being like, I'm not giving you access to that account, right? Like, come on. So the first thing we're going to talk about is life insurance, right? Because it was really important to me that if something happened to me, because my husband and I had made a decision to buy a house that could fit all 6 kids. So
Mhm.
um, we are truly like two parents with 6 kids under one roof.
Yeah.
And that was financially vulnerable for me because my house was mine. It was all paid off, right? Like, so I really wanted to make sure that house became an asset to my kids should something happen because it's the house I bought. But the gym can live there should something happen to me. Like that
Mhm.
my kids aren't gonna be like, "We own it. We love you.
We
You're a great stepdad. Get out." Right?
Right.
Because money is money and it does change people. So we
Yeah.
use life insurance to make sure that he could afford to keep the house, to pay for all the updates. It's built in the 1800s, like slate roof, sewage, things like that
Mm.
happen real easy in a money pit. As well as the fact of my estate documents stating that Jim stays in the house until either he remarries, then you're out, or I'm not one of those people that says like, "Oh, I want him to go and marry
Right.
someone right away." I'm not that person saying like in heaven, I'm probably watching. I'm like, "No,
Yeah.
that's me. I'll get through that." But that the kids, when he passes, will then inherit the house. So he has a home and he has a
Yeah.
home to keep our family structure going. Those are those types of decisions we have to make. And so one of my very first conversations with people is life insurance. Do you have it? Do you not? Who's there? Another one I just touched on, estate documents. I am not a
Mhm.
lawyer, but I need all of my clients to have things written out because that is that piece of paper that can guide our families and protect
Yeah.
our family relationships when we're gone. And the third one is that financial planning. We're going to talk about it. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? How do we get there? And when I find that we have our clients in transition, meaning widowhood, blended families, divorce, it is an emotional time to be making decisions. And it's okay to make some of the decisions that are have to, like if it's a widowhood, social security, life insurance, designations, titling of accounts, titling of assets that we have, and understanding what do we own, what's our net worth, what do we owe,
Right.
where are flows of income coming? And it's almost like I feel like a detective, like peeling things back because sometimes that spouse might not have been in charge of all the finances. They
Yeah.
might not have had all the passwords to get in. Like, how do we get there together through looking at, oh, maybe credit card statements? We can see that there's a life insurance premium paid for every January. Where is that life insurance policy? And then we have to
Mm.
go looking. Many boxes of old paperwork land in my office, and we're sitting there with the clients going through them. I call them dining room table chats. Some of my clients are
Yeah.
young widows or young widowers. We go to the dining room after the kids are put into bed, and we're just sitting there in our stretchy pants with our coffee, looking
Yeah,
through
just
everything. I'm not in my heels in my suit at that time. Like, we're digging in, and then we really
oh,
say, what decisions can we pause? What do we not need to make right now? Let's put the money somewhere safe, or let's have that conversation with the guardian of the kids that we're moving them, right? That they're no
yeah,
longer going to be there. Maybe we can hold off on that, right? And
yeah,
then the last one is, when can you dream again? Because when you're in the middle of all of this transition, dreaming again, those long term goals, we have to be aware of being able to afford retirement or paying off the house or medical coverage. We have to be aware, but maybe we
yeah,
don't have to attack that. And when do you give your permission to dream? I could not dream in that first year. Definitely not the second. That was a nightmare, not a dream. I would have been very negative. I think I'm a positive person. I would have been like,
yeah.
just give me a Pocono house with, the Poconos, we're from PA, with like no one around me. I'll be fine. But then year
Oh,
3 and
yeah.
4, I could dream.
It's so funny that you say that because literally my goal, I'm a few years out from retiring from teaching, and my goal is actually to get a house in the Poconos. I want a cabin in the Poconos. I am a writer, so I'm like, I just want a little cabin where I can write and have a fireplace,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm
My
golden. So
love.
that is my goal. And you are right. I mean, after a deep loss, it can be years before you can start to think that way because a lot of times you feel guilty about
Yeah.
having your own dreams and goals after you've just lost someone, then it's,
Yeah.
so devastating. So, yeah, that's something I talk a lot about in my grief work is just starting with those small goals and what a difference they can make. I
Yeah.
just have
Don't
to
you
say
feel
though,
guilty dreaming about a life without them? Like, it's hard.
yes.
It's hard.
Yes. It is very hard. Very hard. It, you just I have this picture of you like sitting down with these boxes in people's living rooms and I just have to say what a gift that is to your clients because I had to go through that with my dad especially. We couldn't find his will. He didn't have any of his paperwork organized and it was exhausting and honestly scary because you there are things where if you can't find them, you're like, what am I going to do if I don't have the right paperwork? And it's very nerve-wracking. So that is I can imagine that you would get people like that, and it's just so kind of you to walk through that with them. It probably makes it a lot less
Yeah.
scary than it would be without someone like you. So thank you for doing that for people.
No, and thank you for saying that. I do try to be very clear, like when someone comes to work with me, like it's going to be different, and not every person is a client of our firm. Why? Because I hold their hand. I
Yeah.
mommy them a lot. I'm in their business. I want to
Yeah.
know about the next generation. I kind of said something to my husband the other day, my new husband, and I was like, "Oh, I want to meet all of my clients' kids because I want to know which one might have a problem with maybe drinking
Yeah.
or drugs, right? Because they've all
Mhm.
been through something very emotional. It's not just the spouse, it's the
Yeah.
kids of the loss, it's the siblings, right? And then which one has kind of acted like the spouse for years, been mom or dad's best friend. You have to know those roles so that I can support my clients fully. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm in their business. I'm knowing their family. I am mommying them, and I am sometimes knocking on their door, being like, "Hey, you've gone rogue. I haven't heard from you in 60 days, so I showed up."
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of financial planners take that as one of their roles, but it
I
is
don't
one.
think so. I mean, I've been to a few, and no, I've never had anyone. And what you're saying about the kids, I'm just thinking about my sons in my head, and I don't think they'd mind me saying this. My older son, Max, like he is insanely responsible. His paycheck, we've already set him up, and part of it goes in the Roth IRA, and the other part
I
is in
love
his
Ralph.
savings. And like he was into it, and he likes seeing those automatic transfers. And the other one, It's just he's one of those kids where like I actually, change in my will and my documents, he doesn't it goes to someone else for a while that kind of controls it because he is one that I know. Whereas my first son would put it all in the bank, he would spend it all like almost
Right?
immediately, I'm pretty sure. So and I don't want that for him. I want it so that it's there for him to be secure,
Yeah.
but not to blow on whatever he wants. So the fact that you even think about that, because it's so important. It's so important how you handle those documents for their future. And they're the people that you love and care about and want to make sure that they're going to be okay. That's the whole point. So I just
Yeah.
love that so much.
Oh, thanks. And sometimes I look at myself as like a project manager, like because when we're in grief and things are squirreling, you don't even know where to go next, right?
Right.
So, like, okay, so we're going to go sit with the estate attorney. I will take notes. I'll sit in the back corner with your permission. I can sit there because
Yeah.
sometimes you want to make those decisions in private. Maybe you don't want to bring your sister in law or your own sibling
Mm.
because you're not leaving the kids to them. And that's a tight subject, right? So
Yeah.
here we are, like I'm that person. And then where do we go to next? When does the accountant come in? When do they come in? And it's so funny. Thank you for sharing so genuinely about like your kids and their roles.
Yeah.
Do you have time for a quick story? So
Yeah. Go. All the time you need. Go for it.
I sat with my estate attorney, and my financial planner at the time, redoing all of my will and guardianship, and because now it's different, right? So if the kids inherited money, like at what year? Because they were young,
Mhm.
8, 11, and 12. At what
Right.
year did they get it? And I remember saying, in all seriousness, like, okay, they get some at 25. If it's not having to do with college, one at 30, one at 35. It's like, oh, my oldest, his brother and sister have to vote that they like his wife. And if they don't like her, he doesn't get the money. Like, I was like, to keep him in relationship with his younger siblings, and the
Yeah.
attorney's like, "You can't do that." I was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, I can." Like, "Yeah, I want to." Now, we didn't put that in, but I remember my financial planner looking at me being like, "You're really thinking about that." I'm like, "Oh, I am." Like, I
Yeah.
he doesn't have good taste in women at 12. I know it's not gonna get any better. Bad.
It's funny, and you know that best though, but I would have said the same thing when my kids were little. I probably could have predicted, and I've actually changed my will a few times as they get older because originally it was like, when they turn 18, and then I bumped it up to 21, and now that
Yeah,
he's almost 21, I'm like 25. I just keep
right?
bumping it up in increments, waiting for the day that I know he'll actually be responsible.
Yeah,
But yeah, but those are the things that, I mean, that's life. That's
it
life, and I
is.
know it's nothing against them. I love my son to death, but I he knows as well as I do that
Yeah.
any money he gets is just whew, it's gone on whatever he wants. So
And on top of it too, like, I want my kids to know that I got it taken care of,
yeah,
right? Like, maybe some of the kids could know all of the information and some shouldn't, right? But
yeah,
there's gonna be somebody who knows it all. And
definitely.
also, like, so I'm remarried again, right? And so then we have kids from the bottom 3, we have mine, the top 3. And am I gonna put Jim, my new husband, in charge of everything? Heck no, right?
Right.
So it's our best friend, our mutual best friend, the person who introduced us, who's in charge of everything. And she's like, "Oh, don't you go anywhere. I've got those 6 badass crazy kids plus your husband." She's like, "Oh my God." But I sit her down every year and I show her, we
Yeah.
call it the personal document locator. Where is everything, right? It's
Mhm.
what's in the safe deposit box. Please don't put your will and healthcare directive power of attorney in a safe deposit box unless someone else has a key. That could be
Right.
yuck, right? Where's my safe, right?
Yeah.
What police and fire credit union in Philadelphia? There's 9 of them. Where is the
Yeah.
safe deposit box? Which one? Where are the keys? Where are the passwords? Like, these are the things in her eyes. She just rolls. She's like, "Really?
Yes.
Really?" I'm like, "No, I want it to go smooth." So,
Yes.
who's my attorney? Who's my
Yeah.
financial planner? These are the things she needs to know. And then I even have a financial planner for my gym if something happens to me. I'm like, "Will you take my gym on as a client?" And she's like, "Oh
Yeah.
God." I'm like, "Yep, thanks." And we hung up. But these are the
Ah,
decisions that make me feel good.
yeah, they are. It's amazing, and they're not fun to think about, and it is kind of a pain in the ass to get it all done, but once you do, the security that it brings you is invaluable.
Yeah,
Absolutely invaluable. Yeah,
yeah.
I have a whole folder that's called "Brooke is dead." It's got But like my kids and my ex-husband know, that's where it is.
Yep.
You'll find everything you need in the Brooke is Dead file. And it's as morbid as that sounds.
Yeah.
It would, not that it's going to, hopefully they will never have to use it, but it's going to be nice if they do for them. It's like a last little gift to them that I can give. So yeah, I am on board with all
Yeah.
of
I have
your
one that has
ideas.
I have a folder that says Donna's Fun Funeral. So, like,
There
I
you go.
even made it I mean, yeah. I'm gonna tease them from abroad. I'm like, "I would like a mobile kibasi truck at the reception." They're like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, like a food truck for pierogi and
Yeah,
kibasi. Like, that's what I want." And they're like, "Oh god." I'm like, "I'll be
I
watching.
love it.
Make sure it
I
happens."
Yeah. So one of the other sensitive topics that I know you're a proponent of prenups, right?
Mm, I am.
Yeah. Okay, can you
It's
talk
a
a little bit about that? I did not have one for my second marriage because I figured at that time, like, neither of us had a ton of money, so I was like, "What's the point?" And it was one of those hindsight is 2020 situations.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of what's mine, what's yours,
Mhm.
what's ours, what's theirs, right? And because my second husband came from divorce, and,
Mhm.
I can say very nicely, he didn't walk away with much of anything except that garbage bag with his clothes in it, right?
Yeah,
Like, that was it. I came from widowhood, and so it was a little bit different too. I felt like I had assets from my late husband that he left for my kids that I wanted to protect as a
right.
legacy from their dad, and that was a personal choice of mine. But then how do I protect that, right? And you do that
Yeah,
through titling, you do that through a prenup, you do that through estate documents. And a lot of people are, it's an emotional conversation, those prenups, right? Like, are you thinking that the marriage isn't going to last? How could you
mhm,
go into it thinking I would do that? I never would. And again, it is a blessing for the people we leave behind,
yeah,
right? So even if it's a divorce situation, right? My very important to me, and I shared earlier that my Jim would never be homeless, right?
mhm.
That he would always have a home, right? So what are we going to do? We do have a Pocono house, so you can come visit whenever. But it is that is titled in both our names, and I made that decision so that if we did get divorced, he'd get the Pocono house. And it
Yeah,
also keeps me very embedded in the marriage because that's my favorite place on earth. So I don't want to give it to him. So
yeah.
we're just going to make sure that we stay married. Very stubborn. But those are those things. But the prenup is actually, just think of it as whenever we would play board games when we were little, like Trivial Pursuit, you had to read the instructions. You didn't know if you
Right.
had to go around, when you could go up, when you get your piece of pie. Think of that as the prenup. It is the instructions on where things before the marriage and after the marriage and what we built during the marriage took
Yeah.
place. For anyone who owns a small business, I will 100% advocate for getting a prenup. And that's a big thing. I'm protecting my own clients with that
Mhm.
prenup. I'm protecting Jim's ability. He now is the primary caregiver of all of our kids. He deserves a little bit of the growth so that I can be here on a Sunday to record a podcast. It's because he's home with the kids right now. So I
Yeah,
couldn't be me without him. And I need to
yeah,
recognize that. And I need him to know how much I love him and cherish him, even if a few years down the road, maybe it doesn't feel that way. Right. But that it was appreciated in this time.
yeah,
That's the prenup, but get an attorney for both of you, like 2 different ones, and it doesn't have to be too much money. If you guys have open sit with your financial advisor, have the conversations, write out the preliminary, the mine,
yeah,
yours, titling, this is all of it, hand it to the attorneys, and just have them witness it and maybe put you in the right direction. It might not be too expensive at all,
yeah.
but then put that in your fire safe box, that prenup. It's important. Mhm.
Yeah, so someone who is thinking about going into a blended family, is there any advice you can give about kind of starting that conversation? I mean, have you
That's
run into people where, maybe one partner is hesitant or doesn't wanna do it? What do you do in that situation?
I always say, like, sit down with a third party.
Mm,
Because sometimes those are the questions that you I always say, like, there's the voice that comes out of your mouth, there's the voice in the back of your head, right? That voice in the back of your head when you're having a financial conversation that might be uncomfortable before you blend a family, that's the voice that needs to be heard. And it might be a
yeah,
financial advisor or your accountant leading that conversation, or even a life coach or a marriage and family therapist. I love
yeah,
my clients that go to a little bit of therapy before they get married to help with these conversations. We're all private.
yeah,
And my thing is, for most of us blending families, we have been through something. right? Either a divorce or a loss of
Yep.
a spouse, or even the experience of our own parents' divorce. You shared with that. My mom and
Mhm.
dad got divorced, and my mom had no credit card in her name, no job experience. She was devastated, right? And to
Yeah.
see what she did, and then to go through widowhood myself and realize I only had one credit card in my name. Like, what did I not learn from over
Yeah.
there? Right? Like, oh my God. Right? Like,
Yeah. Oh,
but so it is really sitting down and having those conversations. And I always say, let's start with the math of it because there's no emotions in math. Emotions can be applied to it. But what is the net worth? What do
yeah.
we have? Let's make a roadmap. That and then let's talk about each of these pieces of ownership. If I just told you I have a house in Jenkintown and a house in the Poconos, you are like Donna owns two houses. From this conversation, you know that I adore my house in my Poconos, and that's my
Mhm.
retirement plan, right? You wouldn't know that from the math. Does that make sense from just putting it down
Yes.
there?
Yeah,
So put
definitely.
down the math, come to the table and have someone help you steer that conversation. Because if we don't have a third party there, then we have that voice in the back of our head that's being polite or doesn't want to upset someone. The third party is just putting it out there and you're addressing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I had a lot of I say I ran through a bunch of red flags and I did not listen to the voice in the back of my head. I didn't say any of those things out loud. And I wish I
Yeah.
would have. So that is really good advice. I like the third party person that's kind of neutral,
Yeah.
neutralizes things. So
Yeah.
it's a good
Yep,
idea.
and can sometimes lead the conversation. You get too close to it sometimes emotionally,
Yeah.
and we all come with our own, like I was saying, everyone came from something. We all come with our own money mindset, whether it is from what we
Mhm.
saw our parents do to what happened after a divorce, after a loss, or after we saw our parents age, right? There's a money
Yeah.
mindset about what kind of care do we wanna have when we're in our older years. Those things make all the difference when we're having a conversation. So you have to be really respectful of where that other person's coming from. I always say we don't make decisions with the same brain, but we expect people to. Right? Like not
That's
going to
so
be on the
true.
same path.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is so true. You seem like just talking about the running, you're also not the running, the math and
Yeah.
being so organized and everything. You're also a long distance runner, is that right?
I am a long distance runner. It has slowed down a little bit with the second foot surgery.
Oh
But
no.
that is where I get my clarity. That is where the chatter in the back of my head can just stop and I can
Yeah.
just be at peace. And when I do that, I can get a lot of um, life's challenges out of my system physically, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. But then we also use that to actually bring our community together. So we do a lot of fundraising for Safe Harbor, which was that program like the Dougie Center.
Yeah.
And we actually take sometimes that's our ability to say, hey, Team Kendrick's getting together and talking to my late husband's friends from kindergarten. Like, why don't you bring
Yeah.
the kids out? And it's so neat because it's been 11 years since my husband passed. So the kids that ran our first 5K, they might have been 6, now they're 18, right? And now they're kicking my butt, they're running past
Yeah.
me, right? But this might be the only time that we all actually sit and get together, because life moves quick, and so I use running as a way to bridge connections. I run with the, executor to my will, right? She's a good friend, right? And so sometimes we're talking about things, she's like, "Oh my god, can't we just gossip?" I'm like, "No, like, this we're talking about it." And we do it for fundraising, so thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, of course. Well, I love it because I wanted to bring it back. We're, you know, almost out of time here, but I wanted to bring it back to kind of that was one thing that I saw that you do that's something I'm a big proponent of is using your grief as kind of like a reason to honor your loved one and something to, do to honor that grief. And I knew that the long distance running, I love how you use that for fundraising and for Safe Harbor and those kind of things. So, and it's Team Kendrick, you said, is that what you?
Yeah, that's what we call
Yeah,
it, Team Kendrick. So,
yeah, that is great. And I'm
yeah.
assuming that has it helped your grief journey? I always feel like I have Live Like Libby and we raise money for dancers because my daughter was a competitive dancer. So it gives me a purpose, to honor her. So I'm assuming it kind of is similar for you.
It is, and, as, 11 years out, right, and with
Yeah.
with my new husband, Jim, taking care of kind of the kids on the background, I can now actually work as, like, a peer support for Safe Harbor, and so I can now sit every Tuesday night, and I run the adult group, right, so it's those parents
Mhm.
whose kids are in the program, like, I was there 11 years ago, right, and
Yeah.
help to monitor that, so now I can give time, not just before it was just giving funds, right, but through
Right.
community action. But it feels so nice to give the time in a very directed way too. So that's lovely,
Yeah, I always say giving back is one of the most helpful things I think in most people's grief journey.
right?
You said it gives you purpose, makes you feel like you're doing something positive. So,
It makes your
uh,
heart bigger, like that little Grinch,
yes,
right? Like it just gets
yeah,
so big. It's nice.
absolutely. I feel like Donna, I mean, you sound like you've always kind of had your shit together. But for anyone that comes to you who's listening who might feel kind of lost in the early stages of their grief, is there any advice that you'd want them to hold on to if they are not someone like you who is, organized and type A and good with math and probably just
Yeah.
scared out of their mind? What would you say to those people?
Yeah, I mean, a few things. The pragmatic part of me is like find the people around you. I call it who, not how, right? There's a great book by
Mm,
Dan Sullivan about that. But who can help you, not how is it going to get done? Who do you need in your corner? And write that list, right? Just write the
yeah,
list and then maybe give it to a confidant to help put that action step in. In my first book, A Guide to Widowhood, we actually have a list of all things that you can actually have people help you with when you just don't have it in you, right?
right.
So lean in into your community. That's a big part of it. But at the same time, it's okay. And I encourage it's okay some days just to say it's not going to work today. I need
Mhm.
to curl up a ball and I need to just take care of me.
Yep.
I had to learn that in year 2. So give yourself that permission. Now, if it leans into 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, that's a whole different
That's a whole other
conversation.
thing. Yes. Yep.
But it's okay on a rainy Sunday morning to be like, "Hmm,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna take it slow today," right? And it's
Yeah.
okay to say, "I don't really wanna talk to someone today." Having to put on that happy face was just painful in year 2. It really
Yeah.
was. So yeah, so 1, surround yourself with people who can help, whether that be professionals or your community. 2, slow your roll a little bit. What decisions have to be done here and now, what doesn't?
Yeah.
And 3, give yourself grace. Give yourself tons of
Mm.
grace. So,
I
and
love that.
podcasts like this, right? Plug it in
Yeah.
and just listen. Listen to the stories of others, how they do it. That could be your roadmap, right?
Yeah.
Without having to do it yourself.
Awesome advice. Awesome advice. So, where can our listeners find you if they want to read your books? If they want to learn more about your services, where can they go?
Yeah, the easiest way is to go to Donna Jean Kendrick, Jean, DonnaJeanKendrick.com. That's where you can find the links to our podcast, Widow Wisdom and Wealth, all of our books, and a ton of downloadable resources. We talked about the personal document locator that I use. Like you can download that PDF and like you can go through
Yeah.
it. And then if anybody wanted to connect with us on the financial planning side, that is seftonfinancial.com. You can find us there on all social media, LinkedIn, just find connect. My team's out there. They'll be like, "Hey,
Awesome.
so you looked at us." So go ahead.
Very
Connect in.
cool. All right. Well, Donna, thank you so much for joining us. That is, like I said, just so enlightening and something that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about. So I appreciate everything that you're doing for the blended family communities, the widowed communities, and grieving communities. Anyone who's in, a spot that they weren't expecting. Just talking about
Yeah.
how important this stuff is, I think is amazing. So thanks
Well, thank
again.
thank you for your journey and thank you for drinking coffee with me today.
Oh, thank you. All right. If you are watching on the replay or listening to the podcast, I will leave links to all of Donna's information in the description so you can check that out. Thank you so much for joining me on the Morning Coughing podcast, and we will see you guys next week.